The way, because the other thing that everybody wants to talk about is Caitlin playing off the ball. She sounds a little bit fed up already. This is what caught her eye this week. Out of ball play. Why do you think so many people are, as you said, freaking out about this?
Well, I think fans are fans for a reason, right? Like they want to see their favorite players in the way that they've always seen them. I think that certainly when you...
That defensive posture right there tells you everything you need to know about where this is heading. Stephanie White just went on ESPN and doubled down on playing Caitlin Clark off ball, despite Clark herself saying in interviews that she wants to minimize that role. And the reaction from fans has been immediate and brutal. Some are already saying, if this is how Clark gets used, they're done buying tickets. So, let's break down exactly what White said, why it matters, and what this means for the Indiana Fever's future.
So now when you understand, so now you're trying to say, none of us understand basketball. None of us ever played. Nobody knows nothing about basketball if they are not in agreement to Caitlin Clark basically playing small forward, which you tried to do last year. You had Ari McDonald playing point guard and Caitlin Clark playing damn small forward. So because we don't agree with that as fans, we don't know nothing about basketball. Okay, you got it.
I think that certainly when you understand...
Notice how she immediately goes on the defensive about fans not understanding basketball. That's not a coach confident in her system, that's someone who knows the criticism is coming and is preemptively dismissing it. White's argument is that playing Caitlin off ball frees her up from the defensive pressure she faces for 94 feet. But here's the problem with that logic: when you have the best passer in the world, the best point guard in the league, and you take the ball out of her hands, you're not freeing her up, you're limiting what makes her special.
You said the way you see it. Okay, the way you see it ain't the way we agree. We don't have to agree with the way you see the game. And furthermore, the way you see the game, you wasn't like that when you was playing. The way you see the game, you wasn't good when you was coaching at Vanderbilt. The way you see the game, you haven't won titles in the WNBA. So why the hell do we got to go by what you see? Why should we trust what you see? What are you talking about here? This offense was perfectly fine before you.
And there it is, the comparison to the NBA. Every time a WNBA coach wants to justify a questionable decision, they point to the men's league. But White conveniently ignores which NBA players actually play off ball. It's not the primary creators, it's not Luka Doncic or Trae Young. Those guys have the ball in their hands because that's when they're most dangerous, and speaking of Luka, there's a reason White's comments here sound familiar. Back when she was broadcasting Dallas Mavericks games, White actually said on air that the ball moved better when Luka was sitting out with an injury. She doesn't like ball-dominant guards, that's her philosophy. Which raises the obvious question, why did she take the Indiana job?
Trust what you see? What are you talking about? Your offense has been garbage as hell for a long time. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? We had quarters last year where we scored 6 points in your offense. What are you talking about, Stephanie White? Talking about, we're freeing her up by playing her off ball. You're not freeing her up when you got her standing in a corner doing gardening for plants. You don't run screens for her. You don't run her off staggers. You don't run her off of, you don't have designated.
Here's where it gets really problematic. White keeps talking about getting Caitlin easier looks on the second and third side of the floor. But if you actually watch Fever games, that's not what happens. When Clark passes the ball, it rarely comes back to her. The offense stagnates, players like Aaliyah Boston stand around waiting for touches instead of moving, and suddenly you've got Sophie Cunningham cutting and demanding the ball like she's the primary option. This isn't a coherent offensive system. This is White trying to force a Connecticut Sun-style offense onto a roster that doesn't fit it.
Her body, and quite frankly on her mind, and get her some easier opportunities on second, third side of the floor. We got to do that.
Well, you talked about that freedom and...
Second, third side of the floor. When Caitlin passes the ball, it never comes back to her on this offense. Let's just be real here. We've all watched it and seen it. You got Sophie Cunningham standing.
That last line is crucial. White says she doesn't think it's pressure coaching Caitlin Clark. She calls it a blessing and an opportunity, but the rest of that answer reveals the real tension. She talks about how Clark's skill set and basketball mind challenge the coaches to be better. That sounds nice, until you realize what it actually means. It means Clark sees the game differently than White does. And when those visions clash, one of them has to give. Based on what we're seeing, White isn't the one compromising.
She challenges me every day to be better. I mean, her skill set is elite. Her basketball mind is elite. She challenges us as coaches to be better, and it challenges us to put our team in positions, for success, but also allow her to do what she does best. I don't think it's pressure. I think it's, great players want to be around great players, right? And great coaches want to be.
Now, let's talk about White's coaching history, because context matters here. She won a championship with the Indiana Fever in 2012, but that was over a decade ago, with a completely different roster built around Tamika Catchings. When she went to Vanderbilt, the results were mediocre. When she coached the Connecticut Sun from 2022 to 2024, they never won a championship. Her offensive system in Connecticut was conservative, slow-paced, and, frankly, boring to watch. Nobody was tuning in to see Sun games for the offensive execution. And now, she's bringing that same philosophy to a team that has the most exciting offensive player in basketball.
You can go back to when Stephanie White was doing television broadcasting for a Dallas Mavericks game. When she was calling a Dallas Mavericks game that Luka Doncic was sitting out, I believe, due to an injury. He wasn't playing. And during the telecast, Stephanie White is basically quoted as saying, "Oh, look at how the ball pops a lot more when Luka's not in the game, yada, 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 yada." Like, she liked the Mavericks more without Luka than with Luka because she felt like Luka had the ball.
Think about what happened last year under Christie Sides. The Fever had stretches where they looked unstoppable offensively. They also had quarters where they scored 6 points. The inconsistency was maddening, but the ceiling was obvious. When Caitlin had the ball and the offense ran through her, they were electric. The problem wasn't the offensive philosophy, it was execution, roster fit, and defensive issues. Instead of fixing those specific problems, the Fever brought in White to overhaul the entire offensive approach. And what we're seeing now is a coach trying to impose her vision, rather than adapting to her best players' strengths.
You have to come to Indiana. You chose to come to a team with a player whose style you don't like, you don't mesh with, and you knew that before you got here. This is why I'm saying Stephanie White, she's not the coach for Caitlin Clark. This thing was never going to be right from the door. And that's just what it is. They see the game through two different lenses. And
here's what makes this situation so frustrating for fans. Caitlin Clark has been clear about how she sees herself as a player. She's a point guard. She wants to create for others, control the tempo, and make reads. That's what made her a 2-time National Player of the Year at Iowa. That's what drew millions of viewers to women's basketball, and now, you've got a coach who fundamentally disagrees with that style of play. White doesn't want ball-dominant guards, she wants ball movement and multiple creators. Those are two incompatible philosophies, and someone has to win that battle.
We're in trouble. Stephanie White is doubling down on this, keeping the ball out of Caitlin Clark's hands and playing off ball. Get down in the comments. Let me know what you think. This Keep the Vision. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe.
Let's be specific about what off-ball play actually looks like in White's system. It's not Caitlin running off screens like Steph Curry. It's not her relocating to create spacing. It's her standing in the corner while Kelsey Mitchell or Lexi Hull handle the ball. There are no designed off-ball actions for Clark, no stagger screens, no pin downs, no elevator screens. She's just standing there waiting for something to happen. That's not freeing her up, that's wasting her, and the numbers back this up. During the stretches last season when Clark played off ball, her efficiency dropped. Her assist numbers fell. The offense became predictable. Defenses could focus on denying her the ball entirely because they knew Indiana wasn't running actions to get her open. White talks about easing the physical and mental load on Clark by playing her off ball, but that completely misses the point. Great players want the ball in crucial moments. They want the responsibility. Taking that away doesn't help them, it frustrates them. Here's what really concerns me about White's comments on ESPN. She sounds dismissive of the criticism. She's essentially telling fans that if they understood basketball the way she does, they'd see why this is the right approach. But coaching isn't just about X's and O's, it's about maximizing your talent. It's about putting players in positions where they can be successful. And when you have a generational talent like Caitlin Clark, your job as a coach is to build a system around her strengths, not force her into your preferred system. Look at how the best coaches in basketball history have handled elite point guards. Greg Popovich adapted his entire offensive philosophy when Tony Parker emerged as a dynamic creator. Steve Kerr built the Warriors' offense around Steph Curry's shooting and ball handling. Eric Spoelstra let LeBron James orchestrate Miami's offense, even though it meant other players had reduced roles. Great coaches adapt, stubborn coaches impose their will and wonder why it doesn't work. The comparison White made to NBA players is particularly telling. She mentioned that NBA teams play their stars off ball all the time, but that's selective memory. Yes, players like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson play off ball, but they're doing it within a motion offense that's specifically designed to create advantages through movement. And even then, Curry still has the ball in his hands for a huge percentage of possessions. He's not standing in the corner, he's the focal point of everything Golden State does offensively. What White is doing with Clark is fundamentally different. She's reducing Clark's role as a primary creator and asking her to be a spot-up shooter and occasional cutter. That's not maximizing her abilities, that's minimizing them. And fans can see that, which is why the backlash has been so intense. People aren't stupid, they can watch a game and recognize when a player is being misused. The other issue here is roster construction. If White wants to run an offense with multiple ball handlers and constant movement, she needs the right personnel. Kelsey Mitchell is a good scorer, but she's not a primary playmaker. Lexi Hull is a solid role player, but she's not someone who should be initiating offense. Aaliyah Boston is developing nicely, but she's not a point center like Nikola Jokic. The roster Indiana has is built around having one primary creator who makes everyone else better. That's Caitlin Clark. Trying to turn them into the Connecticut Sun doesn't make sense, and let's talk about what happened with the Sun under White's coaching. They were a good team. They made the playoffs, but they were never must-watch television. Their games were defensive struggles with efficient but boring offense. They won games by executing and grinding, not by being dynamic or exciting. That works in the WNBA's current structure where making the playoffs is achievable for most teams, but it doesn't work when you're trying to build a championship contender around a superstar. The Fever have a unique opportunity right now. They have the most popular player in women's basketball. They have a young core with potential. They have fan support that's unprecedented in WNBA history, but they're squandering it by trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. White's system might win them 20 games instead of 13. It might get them to the playoffs, but it won't make them a championship team, and it won't keep fans engaged if they feel like Clark is being held back. What's particularly frustrating is that there's a middle ground here that White seems unwilling to explore. You can have Caitlin Clark as your primary ball handler while still incorporating off-ball actions. You can have possessions where she plays off screens and relocates. You can have sets where other players initiate and Clark comes off pin downs for catch and shoot threes. But that's not what's happening. White is treating this as an either-or proposition, and she's choosing the option that limits her best player. The fan reaction to White's ESPN interview has been overwhelmingly negative, and for good reason. People feel like they're being gaslit. They can see with their own eyes that Clark is more effective with the ball in her hands. They can see that the offense stagnates when she's relegated to a spot-up role. And then White goes on television and tells them they don't understand basketball. That's not how you build trust with a fan base. So where does this leave the Fever heading into next season? They've committed to White as their coach. She's signed through 2027. That means unless something dramatic changes, this is the system Clark will be playing in for the foreseeable future. And that should concern everyone who wants to see her reach her full potential, because right now, it looks like White is more interested in proving her offensive philosophy works than in adapting to maximize her superstar. The question fans need to ask is this: Are you watching Indiana Fever games to see Stephanie White's offensive system, or are you watching to see Caitlin Clark do what she does best? Because if it's the latter, and White continues down this path, you might be disappointed. And based on the comments on social media, the message boards, and the reaction to this ESPN interview, a lot of fans are already reaching that conclusion. They're saying if Clark isn't going to be used properly, they're not spending money on tickets, they're not buying jerseys, they're not tuning in. That's a problem the Fever front office needs to take seriously, because this isn't just about winning games, it's about building a sustainable franchise around a generational talent. And if the coach's philosophy is fundamentally incompatible with that talent's strengths, something has to give. Either White adapts, or the Fever risk wasting the Clark era before it really begins. So, what do you think? Is Stephanie White right that playing Caitlin Clark off ball is the best way to maximize her effectiveness, or is this a stubborn coach trying to force a system that doesn't fit her best player? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you want to see more WNBA analysis, and subscribe because we're going to be covering this story all season long. This tension between White and Clark isn't going away, and it's going to define Indiana's season one way or another.